So one thing I like about the Flavia Deluxe novels is that there's a lot going on in them. Um, yes, you have the main plot of a mystery that Flavia is like kind of playing amateur detective at and trying to gather clues and deduce evidence and such. But the, one of the things I like about them is like there's a whole universe of side characters going on through all of these books, and you find out more and more about them as the series progresses. And in this one, speaking from among the bones, uh, there's a heck of a lot going on. Um, it's a little longer than usual, and there's actually a lot more complexity to the plot. And then, not to mention, there's several subplots of side characters going on all at the same time. The main story is going on with Flavia. The main story, though, is like the church organist has been found dead in a crypt of the town saint they're digging up for Easter. And so it's up to Flavia to figure out who killed the guy and why and how. Meantime, her sister, Daphne, the middle child, Daphne, is wanting to become the organist for the church, and she's about to make her debut. And then meanwhile, you find out things about the vicar and his wife, and how they have a past that ties into everything going on. So there's a lot going on. Meanwhile, also, the family estate of Buckshaw is being sold because they can no longer afford to live there. And so the whole Flavia, her sisters, and her father, as well as her father's servant Digger and the cook, Miss Mullet, are all dealing with that. So, like I said, there's a whole universe of characters, and this series develops all of them. Not just the main characters of Flavia and her family, but the whole townsfolk all kind of get a little more developed with each one. And that's what I like about this series. They feel like real characters. They feel like real townspeople in this little countryside place. And Flavia, despite being a genius, as well as an eccentric 11-year-old girl, feels like a real kid. She feels like a real character that just happens to be super smart at chemistry and poison. And there's little touches of the things that she says that a kid, albeit a very bright kid, would think of to say when recording everything that's going on. One little thing I like throughout the series is Flavia has a bicycle that she rides everywhere, and she's named it Gladys. And she'll describe Gladys as having human characteristics, or talk to Gladys as if Gladys is a person instead of just a bicycle. She'll describe things like she gave her handlebars a gleam of happiness, things like that. I find very charming. So, excuse me. So, I definitely recommend this series. There's so much going on in this particular book. Like, this one kind of steps everything up. There's all kinds of people going in and out. There's a private investigator that's been hired to figure out what's going on. There's a magistrate that you find out has a connection to Flavia's mother. There's this church choir singer woman that fancies herself an amateur detective that has a connection to the deceased organist. All these things are going on. There's so many different plot threads, more than a typical Flavia Deluxe novel, all intersecting and going on. And Flavia's kind of fingering all these pies, trying to figure out how they all connect to each other. And so there's all these characters that we've known from the previous books, and there's new characters being introduced. There's a lot more plot lines going on all at once. Not to mention our oldest sister, Ophelia, is getting married, so that's a subplot going on as well. That's being tackled in this. And she's marrying a character that has been introduced in a previous novel. So I like how not only a novel in the series will introduce a character, but they'll keep reoccurring as featured characters throughout the series. Alan Bradley doesn't introduce a character and then just discard them. They come back later, and I like how that's organic. It feels like a real town, and I like how this series develops all these things, and has these characters return, and you find out a little more about them. So like a character that may have been introduced in the first book, you'll find out like, oh, they have like this whole backstory in the 5th book, which this is the 5th book, so you find out a lot from characters that were merely just side characters in the first book. So it's fun. Also, one thing I like is that while this series is formulaic, it doesn't like I like the formula. It doesn't feel formulaic. It feels like these are real characters, but at the same time, these characters all have roles. Like the family servant Dogger is like, you know, he may be the family servant, but he's like this very, very smart guy who happens to know like a lot about whatever subject Flavia goes to talk about him. Like he's kind of like this character that's kind of steps in to be like, oh, I know all about this, which can further move the story along. Things like that. Each of these characters has an assigned role in the plot of these novels that, while it is repetitive, I don't mind, because I understand that while these are characters serving a function for the plot, they are still lifelike and interesting and likable characters. So that doesn't bother me. It's just kind of like these novels are kind of a mix of things. They're kind of a mix of cozy mystery with dry humor. They can be whimsical. They can be intense as fuck. They can be dark. They can be silly. They can be all these things in like one series. It's very interesting. Oh, and also, I like how this novel ends. The very last sentence of it is a fucking cliffhanger for the next book, which is funny because all the other books had concluded. And, like, they could wrap themselves up and be, like, a self-contained story. Not this one! Speaking from Among the Bones is, like, the ending of it is like, oh, by the way, intro to next book. I was like, alright. Alright, Bradley, okay. Fine. So, now I'm, of course, obligated to read the next book. So, I mean, I was going to anyway, but now I'm obligated to. So, anyways, yeah. The next book's called The Dead and Their Vaulted Arches. I'll be reading that one as soon as possible, and I'll do a video on that one as well. So till then, I'm sure I'll have some other videos soon. I'm trying to like do this more regularly, and I don't know when I'll have the next video up, but it'll hopefully, like I said, it'll be pretty quickly. So till then, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.